What's up everyone, welcome to the Angling Scotland channel. My name's Sean, you'll find me on social media as Sean Afnan or on YouTube as Southside Fly Fishing. And today I'm going to tie this little fly that I have in the vise here. This is a size 18 pheasant tail micro nymph. And it's a fly that's been very effective, very successful for me. It's very simple in terms of its construction. The main difficulty in tying this fly is of course the fact that it's so small and managing the materials and the proportions. It's a good imitation for a small olive. It can look like a midge. It could look like a very small freshwater shrimp. And because of the slimline profile and the fact that I'm using a tungsten bead and quite a heavy hook, it's really effective at getting down through the water column to where the trout and grayling are likely to be. So I normally fish this fly on the point. I normally fish it under an indicator, and it works really well dead drifting through a run or through a pool, but it's also something that benefits from a little bit of animation as you're fishing through. So I'm going to stop talking now and just jump into tying the fly. So the hook that I'm using for this is a size 18. And it's a partridge jig hook, that's the SLJ. And this is a size 18, but it's a relatively short shank and a wide gape. And onto there, all I've done so far is I've popped on a 2.8mm copper bead, and that's a slotted tungsten bead. And I'm using an orange thread. It's not a luminous orange thread, it's quite a subtle orange. And at various points when I'm tying this fly, I want to see the thread coming through. So that's the reason for using an orange rather than like a brown or a black thread. So all I've done so far is to keep the bead in place is I've put a few thread wraps in behind the bead, and that's also helping to create a taper towards where the thorax of the fly will be. Then we're going to wind the thread down to just where the hook starts to curve. And then the tail for this fly, I'm using 2 strands of crystal flash. So hanked crystal flash usually comes like this. That's enough to tie flies until I'm 80 years old. So all I'm doing is I'm taking a little piece of one little strand of crystal flash. I'm going to lay it across and tie it in with a pinching loop. And then pull back the waist end and make that my second strand of crystal flash. And then with the waist end, you want to make sure that you don't cut it exactly the same size as the first piece, because then they tend to stick together. So either go slightly longer or slightly shorter. And there you go, that's the tail of your fly. So next we've got our rib, and for this I'm using, well, there's so many numbers on here, I don't know how to describe it. It's like a medium fine copper wire. So I'll take a length of that off. Get far too much there, never mind. And then lay that across the hook shank. Bring it back up to the eye. What we're trying to do here is to keep the body relatively flat, and if at all possible we can encourage a bit of taper with the thread wraps. But don't worry, because even if we just end up with a flat shape, or even because we've got those materials in at the back, you get a little bit of a bump, you can even that up with the materials that come next. So next thing we're going to do is add in our pheasant tail. And I buy these in little sections. I know the most efficient thing is to buy a full tail, but I use pheasant tail in so many different colours. I use the natural, I use blacks, I use olives, and this one, which is my current favourite, is a fiery brown. And so rather than buying, you know, whole tails and all of these different colours, I like these little sections that you can buy, and it's a good way of getting started with pheasant tail if you're new to fly tying. So I'm just going to separate out a couple of these fibres. Again, there's no exact science to this, but I find usually a wee bunch of about 6 works well for this. Okay, I'm just going to moisten the pheasant tail, and I'm going to trim off the very ends just to make sure that they're all lined up, and that when I tie this on I don't miss any. I'm trapping all of the fibres. So I want to take this back to where I tied in the rib, and then wind up forward. Now, before you tie in the pheasant tail, it makes sense to lift it vertical to the hook shank and just stroke and make sure all of these fibres are pulled together. We're just going to go ahead and do our best to wind the pheasant tail up the shank, avoiding the barb of the hook as we go. And then at this point, I'm going to lift it up, tie it in, making sure once you let go of the pheasant tail, you keep the thread tight, and then just wraps either side and trim it off as close as we can. Cool, then the next thing is to bring up our wire. So we turn at the back. With a fly this size, you're probably looking at about 4 that is, 4 turns of wire. Cross over the thread, a couple of wraps this way, then a couple of wraps in front, just crisscrossing over those wire wraps. And then when we're happy, holding the thread tight. There we go. Okay, and what I've got here is some, I mean, you'll barely be able to see it, but it's some ice stub by Hairline, and the colour is black peacock. And in some sort of traditional tyings of the pheasant tail nymph, the thorax uses a little bit of peacock herl. Obviously we don't have space in here to add peacock herl, so this ice stub gives that really nice point of interest at the thorax, and will also help to give us that nice tapered shape that we're looking for in a nymph. So it's so difficult to use the right amount. I almost always put too much on, even the tiniest pinch is too much, but we're just looking for a thorax there. Okay, I think that's good. Doesn't matter at all if it's a wee bit rough. And then I'm just going to add a couple of wraps here, both to fill in the gap between the thorax and the bead, also to make sure that when I do my whip finish I've got a little bit of that nice orange colour coming through. And then that's the last thing to do, so a wee whip finish. And Bob's your uncle. So there we go, that's my version of a pheasant tail micro nymph. It's one that catches me loads of fish, both grayling in the winter but also trout in the trout season. It's one I would definitely recommend in small sizes, 16, 18 that I've tied here, but even 20s, 22s. To tie some up for your box, fish them with confidence throughout the year, and I hope that they're as effective for you as they are for me.